Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Rushcliffe series. This is the southernmost district in Nottinghamshire and it contains 59 civil parishes of England. And there's some corkers down here. Let's dive in and check one out. Welcome back to Rushcliffe again, everybody. Now, there's not many villages here in Nottinghamshire that are left that I actually know, but this is one of them. This is a place which sits just to the south of Newark and Sherwood, right on the border with Syerston, if you can remember that episode from the Newark and Sherwood series. It's also the parish that has, mostly, RAF Syerston within it. Its name is Flintham. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Flintham, Flinta's homestead. I've been looking forward to this one, you know. It's funny, in the intro, I knew this was one of the Nottinghamshire villages remaining that I knew, but it wasn't until I got home that I realised in actuality it's the only one. So this is a milestone. This is the last place in Nottinghamshire to which I've been to before. And we have mentioned part of this one before in the Newark and Sherwood series. The reason why comes in the form of RAF Syerston, which falls mainly within the boundaries of Flintham. This is a village with a lot more than just a World War II airbase though. Flintham has one of the grandest Victorian houses ever built, and it's still lived in by the Hildyard family to this day. The hall has a unique glassed roof conservatory modelled on London's Crystal Palace. It is of course out of bounds to us, but we will still discuss both it and the family who live in it at length. The other notable building in this village is one that shouldn't even really be standing. The former officers' mess for the RAF base is a battered, run-down eyesore these days, and it should have been pulled down by now, but in this video we'll also discover why it's still here. Flintham has plenty more. No less than 4 schools, a chapel, a church, a pub, and a total of 38 listed buildings. There's a lot to get through. Let's go. We begin on the A46, the new version, which we've mentioned a couple of times in previous episodes. The last time we actually saw this road was in the Syerston episode of Newark and Sherwood. When the new road was constructed, one of the effects it had on Flintham was creating a brand new village, which actually already existed. Now, if that sounds confusing, let me explain. When the old route of the A46 was still the main through road, Flintham had a detached housing estate called Coney Grey Spinney just off it. Even so, it was still considered to be part of Flintham village. Now though, the new road has turned Coney Grey Spinney into a de facto dead end, only accessible from the new A46 junction or from Flintham village itself. In effect, it's a brand new settlement, despite it being here all along. It even has its own village signs these days. So what is it and why is it so far away from the main village? Well, the answer is all to do with the RAF. Coney Grey Spinney originated as the married quarters for RAF Syerston, a similar setup to something we've seen countless times before at other air bases up and down the country. Most of Coney Grey Spinney's housing is post-war, and a lot of the houses are now privately owned. The name Coney Grey Spinney is an interesting one. It literally means rabbit warren or rabbit wood. The wood in question still exists between the street and the RAF base. What with the new layout of the area given the new route of the A46 and the thicket of trees, Coney Grey Spinney has become a very secluded, out-of-the-way kind of place. It's certainly a lot quieter than it used to be. The road that now links it to the A46 passes the main gates of RAF Syerston. A quick reminder about the base: it was opened in 1940 and used by the RAF as a bomber base during World War II. It has a few modern functions, but it's mostly used now by the RAF Central Gliding School as their main training facility. If you need to know more about the base, just go and watch the Syerston episode right after you've watched this one. Now we've come over the A46 and we're in an area called Inhomes. There are two main landmarks here. Firstly, this is Flintham Cricket Club. Founded in 1870, arguably this club has one of the best grounds anywhere in rural Nottinghamshire today. Flintham are members of the South Nottinghamshire Cricket League and have 4 sides, 3 senior and 1 social. The first 11 play in Division A, the South Notts League's highest level. The ground looks immaculate, but the building next door is anything but. This is RAF Syerston's former officers' mess, and mess is the right word. This building has had a checkered past to say the least. This was until quite recently accessible and open to urban explorers, but now it's been closed off and is guarded by a raft of CCTV. After serving as the officers' mess, the building became the Al Jamia Al Islamiyah Institute, an Islamic boarding school for boys, in 1994. It closed in 2007 and ever since the buildings have stood empty, becoming an unholy haven for crime and antisocial behaviour in the process. The fact it's still standing is quite remarkable. 3 years ago, more than a dozen fires were started deliberately inside the building. So surely you'd have thought it would be best to knock it down, right? As we drive away from the building via Inhomes Gardens, which is directly opposite the cricket club, let's discuss why it's still standing. The reasons are astounding. There have been several attempts to demolish it before now, but they've all failed. In 2016, the Madney Trust, the Nottingham-based education charity which owns the site, received planning permission to build up to 95 homes on it, and was given a maximum of 3 years to do so after previous plans fell through. However, the notice for that expired in 2019. Now there's a new problem. Bats roosting in the derelict buildings are holding up any potential demolition. Plans though have been put forward recently to construct a 5.6 metre tall bat barn to alleviate that issue. Let's start the main walk around the village now, and to begin with we're on a footpath which runs parallel to the main street. This is nothing terribly exciting, but the views are good from this. It was a bit wet underfoot from the morning dew, but at least the rain from the day before had gone. Yay! It brings us to Spring Lane, the very same road which we were on in Colston and Screverton. This is the other end of it. Both the Wesleyans and the Primitive Methodists had chapels in Flintham by 1869. Spring Lane has the Wesleyan effort, which stands tall among a collection of houses and barns. Spring Lane also has a bus stop. Flintham is served by the number 354 between Newark and Bingham. Speaking of transport, at the end of the road there's something else that might be transport related. Sarah's Mount, I'm guessing, might be used as a block for mounting horses. I can't think of any other explanation really. After turning left, we're now making our way up a track that leads to both Flintham Hall and the church. We won't be able to get to the hall though. On the right, as I slalom through some roadworks, is the Grade 2 listed Old Vicarage or Rectory. To the church then. Flintham's church is dedicated to St Augustine of Canterbury. This has stood here as the main religious landmark in the parish since at least Norman times. Its nave was rebuilt in 1828. The medieval church was originally cruciform in shape, considered unusual for the area. The tower has some medieval herringbone stonework and contains 4 bells, the oldest dating back to 1613. The church was given to Welbeck Abbey during the reign of King John. When that was dissolved, Henry VIII gave the rectory, patronage and a considerable estate in Flintham to Trinity College, Cambridge. They all subsequently came into the ownership of the family who still live at Flintham Hall. From the churchyard you can see some of it, including its tall Victorian conservatory and a few other buildings like the service wing, bakehouse and cart shed. Most of it though is out of view owing to some high walls and lots of trees. 3 names are associated with Flintham Hall: Hildyard, Thoroton and Blackbourne, which are in fact all tied together. We'll learn how shortly. Around the other side of the churchyard we get a better view of the old vicarage. There are 12 listed buildings in this one area alone. So from the churchyard you can actually get into Flintham Hall. You have to go through this gate right here, but as you can see it says private property, so you do need prior permission to actually go through that gate. So what does Flintham Hall actually look like then? Well, luckily the internet exists and that means I can show you. Flintham Hall is a Grade 1 listed country house on the much wider Flintham estate. It was built in 1798 on the site of an earlier house bought from the Disney family by Thomas Thoroton 9 years earlier. It was extended in the 1820s by the architect Lewis Wyatt and remodelled again in the 1850s by George Thomas Hine. The conservatory, with its arched glass roof, was influenced by London's Crystal Palace. It's considered to be the finest of its type left in England. So who lives here? Well, the answer is a little complicated. The short answer is the Hildyard family, but that's not strictly accurate. The name of the Hildyard family was initially Thoroton. Adding to the confusion, the name Blackbourne is also thrown into the mix. The first family member associated with the hall was Thomas Blackbourne Thoroton Hildyard, an MP for Grantham who served as a colonel in the Coldstream Guards during the American War of Independence. He was a descendant of Mary Blackbourne, who was the daughter of Sir Richard Levitt, the Lord Mayor of London. Mary, in turn, was the widow of the merchant Abraham Blackbourne and her second husband, Robert Thoroton, of Screverton Hall. The Thoroton Hildyard family continued to reside at the hall to this day. In 2005, the family's best-known representative, Miles, died right here in Flintham. He was famed for winning the Military Cross for a daring escape from a prisoner of war camp after the Battle of Crete in 1941. His wartime service was also recognised with an MBE. Miles Hildyard later became Flintham's Lord of the Manor and a long-serving president of the Thoroton Society, Nottinghamshire's foremost historical organisation. He had a number of notable works published, the best known being his World War II letters and a diary he wrote while serving as a captain in the Nottinghamshire Yeomanry. Both were collected in a book published by Bloomsbury in 2005 entitled It Is Bliss Here, Letters Home, 1939 to 1945. He also wrote detailed histories of the Thoroton and Hildyard families and a history of Flintham village. He's buried in the churchyard of St Augustine, and in his obituary, published in The Independent, Flintham Hall was described as perhaps the most gloriously romantic Victorian house in England. The hall is now the home of Miles's nephew Sir Robert Hildyard and his wife Lucy. It was recently the chief location for Easy Virtue, a movie based on the Noel Coward play of the same name. It was also used in And When Did You Last See Your Father, a film starring Jim Broadbent and Colin Firth, which was directed by Annan Tucker. Back to the route, and next we have the village hall. This used to be one of Flintham's 4 schools. It was built in 1873, a fact confirmed by a huge date stone on its exterior wall. One of the other schools was exclusively for girls, built 4 years earlier than this in 1869. Next door to this one is the Scout Hut, set back from the road. Flintham's other 2 schools are almost right next door to each other. One of them is the modern primary school between the main village and Inn Homes. The other one is now something very different and very unique. In 1779, this tiny building was opened as Flintham's first school. Now it's the Flintham Museum, which gives its visitors a fascinating insight into rural life through the eyes of a village shopkeeper. The museum opened in 1999 and it's owned and run by volunteers. It's not open every day, but there are some information boards outside. This one tells us about Flintham's former windmill, which stood southeast of the village on a tall hill. Stones from its site were sold in 1919 and 20. The museum also features this cute little nature area. This pond is home to several species of wildlife. On the next bend, where the road turns towards Inn Homes, is Flintham Cemetery, used for burials as the churchyard at St Augustine's is now full. On the other side of the road is the current Flintham Primary School, one of 12 that together form the Equals Trust Academy. It might be small, but its grounds are extensive and contain a wildlife pond, an adventure trail, a climbing frame, a playing field, a vegetable garden, and a quiet Millennium Garden. We've turned around now and we're heading for Main Street. In doing so, we pass this little orchard opposite the village hall. Lovely stuff. Well, with it being really early on a Saturday morning when I'm filming this one, it feels like I've got the village to myself because I haven't seen a single soul here this morning since I've been here, believe it or not. There's the odd car that's come past, but they don't really count, do they? So now all I've got to do is walk all the way down Main Street, which you can see behind me. Long, linear street that runs all the way back to the beginning. There is one little bend at the end, but that's pretty much the only bend in it. It's otherwise dead straight. And everything else in Flintham is on this very road. Before we go any further, we ought to get the parish notice board out of the way. Tick off Flintham. So now we're off down Main Street, which has a raft of interesting features, pretty much everywhere you look. It has 17 of the 38 listed buildings in the village. That's a lot. Flintham used to have a lot more than it currently has, amenities-wise. This house used to be the old post office, for example. There's now no post office today, nor is there a shop. Mind you, the old phone box is still in use. This has now become the local book exchange, and it's well stocked too. Next up, we have the Coach House, which is a coffee shop and tea room. It's next door to the 17th century Boot and Shoe Inn, Flintham's only pub. This was once frequented by many of the famous 617 Dambuster Squadron while they were stationed at RAF Syerston during World War II. Star Pubs and Bars now own the building. Moving on down the road, we pass the Manor House, one of several tall buildings between here and the end, which make Flintham feel almost urban. There are still some clues though that you're in the countryside. Take these two likely looking figures in a nearby garden. There's not a lot left now other than housing, but isn't it all great? And it was still so quiet too. As I ambled down the street, I was passed by the number 354 bus on its way to the stop at Spring Lane. Here's a bit of trivia to finish. Flintham is one of 20 or so places in Nottinghamshire where the historian Maurice Barley found evidence of a traditional English ploughboys' play being performed. It was last performed in Flintham in 1925, but it was revived by the Foresters Morris men in 2014 with schoolboys from the village. It was performed at Nottingham Castle in September of that same year. As we drive away from the village, we pass the Flintham Pinfold, the third of the three circular ones we first encountered in Scarrington. It's another of the Grade 2 listed buildings here. Now, speaking of listed buildings, in the next one we'll be seeing another ancient dovecote. Join me there as we continue our Rushcliffe journey further into the countryside. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.